What's shaking, everybody? If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning viewer or subscriber, you already know. I'm Say the Breeze, and this is Say the Breeze Gaming. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Starfield. In this review, I'll be analyzing the base game as is, and I'll be highlighting mods that add to, expand, and improve the game. With the new update, DLC, and PS5 release only hours away, I thought this would be a great time for this review, so players have all the insight they'll need to decide if this game is something they'd be interested in playing and even buying. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about what type of game Starfield is. Starfield is advertised as a role-play game with meaningful customization, dialogue, and choice, like many other Bethesda games. However, Starfield is now beginning to be viewed as a cozy game due to the game's lack of role-play elements, which I'll be digging deeper into later in this video. Now, after playing Starfield, I realized Starfield isn't just one type of game, and that's partially why a lot of people were disappointed with it because it doesn't have the wanted and expected depth into just one game type category. But Starfield is a game you can tailor to your playstyle and liking. Starfield is an open world, highly replayable, single player role play game where you choose the person you are, the path you take, and the decisions you make lead you to more adventures. You can be a space trucker delivering resources across the settled systems, an industry giant selling, supplying, and shipping resources across the stars. You can be a space taxi pilot flying people to their dream destinations, or you can be a space marine fighting to protect the UC. There are so many options. And there are mods that add in more jobs that you can do in game. Starfield is also a cozy game in its own way. You can cook, harvest resources, build a home outpost, build and live in your ship, and decorate the interiors. You can build outposts for your crew to live in and work at, and you can station them there while you go off and explore. And Starfield is an adventure game because the more you roam, the more you find and the more you encounter. From meeting random cruise ship pilots to discovering fallen ships and meeting unforgettable strangers. Starfield has a universe that is overlooked because many of the roleplay features that could have been implemented in the game weren't. And there are quite a few immersion breaking things that are extremely hard to ignore. For example, the NPCs feel more alive than the player at times because we can watch them dance, eat and drink, sit and lay down, and even use things around the world. But we are stuck with no RP animations, and when we sit and sleep, we are stuck looking at a dull, immersion breaking screen. And another thing that is extremely immersion breaking is the thing that is the most talked about when it comes to Starfield, and rightfully so, the loading screens. There are so many loading screens in Starfield that could have just been covered. And this has been proven by modders who have added functionality to the game. For instance, working elevators in ships and around the maps, and making the train work. And I do want to mention that there is a cool loading screen feature where when you take pictures in the photo mode, those pictures are saved to a gallery, but also they can be shuffled and loaded as load screens. And even though that feature is nice, there are still an overwhelming amount of load screens. And right now, there is no way to avoid them other than using mods. Thankfully, there's a few mods that fix this and open the game up to be a role player's playground. With mods that unlock the hidden animation markers, Starfield becomes so much more fun to play. Now let's talk about Starfield's menu, HUD, and user interface, each of which are extremely detailed but effectively organized and labeled so they are user friendly and easy to understand. Some games have menus that are confusing and unappealing, but with Starfield, the menus have a concise, clean, futuristic textile design with a more minimalist color scheme. However, it still looks really nice. And most importantly, they are easy to adapt to learn to use, and rely on throughout your playthrough. Now, the one thing I want to mention about the HUD for the ship specifically is that the screen feels cluttered. And that is another immersion breaking thing. I do want to say that in the new update, it did look like there was going to be ship HUD changes. So I don't know if they're going to give us the option to customize the HUD and limit the amount of options that are on the screen, which would be nice, or if they're just going to redesign the ship HUD. But that's definitely something I'm looking forward to seeing in the new update and updating you guys on in another video. Now there is one HUD menu that if you don't pay attention to the instructions, you will be confused, and that's the outpost linking menu. The other menus for managing your inventory, keeping track of your mission logs, you can check your stats and progress, where you manage your crew, and you can inspect your ship and your gear. All of those are much more clear, straightforward, and easy to understand. And there are quite a few mods that are available on the Creation Center that you can download to customize the HUD, but I personally haven't tested any out yet. And now, since I mentioned it, let's go ahead and move on to talking about Starfield's customization. You can customize your character using sliders to sculpt their face and body shape. There are various hairstyles, hair colors, and hair textures, but there are too few hairstyles that fit the theme of the game. There is a mod that adds dozens of new hairstyles and beards to the game, and some even incorporate tech that really matches the futuristic Starfield theme. Now, tattoos are limited only to the face and neck. If you want more tattoos, you'd have to get a mod for that too. There is also a limited amount of accessory options from hats to jewelry, but if you want more like necklaces, glasses, and watches, you can find those on the Creation Center. You can choose your character's backstory and 3 traits, and they're not just placeholders in there for decoration. They actually add dialogue options in game, and you can hear characters react to your backstory throughout the game.
So, your file says Ronin. What does that mean exactly? You one of those sword people? You know they make guns now, right?
And with mods, you can expand on this, so you can have more than one backstory and give yourself more than 3 traits. And the clothes options, they are really nice, and there are so many choices, and a lot of them are roleplay centered. There are ways to acquire outfits from some NPCs without needing mods, but the unnamed NPCs you see around the city, they have really cute outfits, but you can't get those without a mod. And when it comes to outfits, they aren't modular. The only modular items you can mix and match are the full spacesuits, helmets, and the space packs. If you really like mixing and matching your fashion items in game, then you're going to want to look for some mods too. And there are quite a few available. And some wearable gear items already come with special boost effects. But then you can upgrade quite a few of them at the workshop bench. There's also skin slots on gear and on weapons, but so far in Starfield's base game, there's only one option, which is the old Mars skin pack. And on the Creation Center, the skin options are limited too. And with the game releasing with no skins, it showed there was a plan to implement more in time or leave the door open for modders to create some on the Creation Center, which released after the game did. And now that we've looked at Starfield's customization options, let's move on to the settings, because there's more customization there. Starfield is unique because it lets you edit different game features to complement or challenge your playstyle. Do you want ground combat enemies to be more competitive? Do you want space combat to be easier? Do you want to have more realism in the game where eating and drinking matters? Or do you hate being over encumbered? Well, you can edit all of these different settings to tailor the game to your liking. You can also edit the display settings, which I know a lot of gamers like. You can go from 30 to 60 FPS, and you can choose if the game prioritizes visuals or performance. You can edit the control sensitivity, you can invert the controls and the game cameras, and you can remap the controls. And they do let you adjust the in-game volumes, but there isn't much music in the game. You do have the option to turn off a few elements of the HUD, like the crosshair and the floating numbers, which I really didn't enjoy. And there's quite a few accessibility features too. You can adjust the camera offset, the field of view sliders, and there's options to turn subtitles on and off and to adjust how much the camera shakes. I really like that Starfield has so many options in the settings. I will always stand by the fact that if games have more setting options, they are more accessible for gamers because some gamers have different limitations than others. And I do want to mention something really important. If you experience photosensitivity at all, please heed the photosensitivity warning on Starfield. This is a game with extremely clear graphics, a lot of powerful lighting, and I even had to take a break a few times while playing the game. And since we went over Starfield's settings and accessibility, let's move on to the gameplay perspectives, which is something that's really important and will determine if a lot of players play the game or not. Starfield is available to play in two different gameplay perspectives, first and third person. And I was stoked to see this because personally, I can't play first person lock games for too long, or I will get nauseous. And there's a lot of other beautiful games out there that limit their reach because they're just determined to stay one point of view. Starfield stands out because not only does it have two gameplay perspectives, it also incorporates it seamlessly with doing other animations. And now that I've mentioned seamless transitions, let's talk about Starfield's tutorial. Starfield's tutorial is tied into the first mission of the game. It's like an interactive cutscene. So that means if you don't pay attention and you want to relearn something, you'll have to start a new game. And also, that means if you're starting a new game, you'll have to replay the tutorial if you're not going through New Game Plus. Or if you want to get around the tutorial and skipping the beginning missions, you can use mods. And now let's talk about the game's movement. Starfield has some of the cleanest animations and smoothest and fluid movement I have ever felt in any game before. The only downside I see in Starfield's game movement is that we don't have a prone option. And since Starfield added vehicles, let's go ahead and talk about the driving. The controls are immersive to the game because each stick controls your speed and direction the same way you have handles that you're holding instead of a steering wheel. But man, I have to say, there is a learning curve with that. It is definitely something to adapt to. It reminds me of driving controls in an FPS game. If you've ever experienced it before, you know what I mean. And now let's talk about Starfield's story, missions, and quests. The main storyline started off really, really slow, but over time it picked up, and I got intrigued because the world that the game is set in is tied so well into the story that it keeps you wanting to explore, but it also keeps you wanting more. More slates that you can read and find out more about the different in game lore. Talking to the NPCs and hearing some of their stories, it really draws you into the game more and more. However, I really do wish there was more options of being able to talk to the NPCs because the universe is already so alive. So it's not just a background for the game. It's a place you want to get to know more about and also see more of. That's why I personally love the side quests and activities. I just wish there was so many more of them. With the universe's biggest Starfields, they could have implemented more jobs and even some mini games, instead of leaving it up to our imagination and mods. They had the perfect opportunity to expand on the settlement system and even implement even a family system. They already kind of have the assets for it because of the kid stuff trait and outpost building. I do love the fact that we can go bounty hunting in the game, and I love that they implemented a jail system, but I wish they would have expanded on it because they really would have been the first game to do so. Right now, if you get sent there, it's after surrendering and it just sends you in a loading screen and then you leave. They definitely could have did more with this. Hopefully some modders will if the devs don't. I did learn the hard way that your decisions you make in game really do matter and can make a difference. So there are consequences during missions, but there aren't many new consequences after you choose a faction. But it does leave the door open if you want to join multiple factions. And now let's talk about Starfield's combat. The combat in the game is actually really fun. It's action packed, and you can adjust in the settings if you want more of a challenge. And now let's talk about the photo mode, which is one of my favorite features. There's filters you can use, different sliders to adjust the photo, and various photo frames and poses you can use to create the picture of your dreams. I definitely wish there was additional photo frames and poses, but there was recently a new mod that came out that adds 22 new photo poses, which is really nice because I can level up my game photography. So I can keep highlighting and showcasing my new builds and my outposts. And that's the next category I want to talk about, outpost building. You can build massive outposts or even small crew homes, and you can decorate the interiors. You can mine or purchase the materials you need to build, but I do wish there was more furniture unlocked in the game for us to use. And that leads me to the next category, what could have been? Things that are hidden and locked in Starfield. Since I started playing Starfield with mods, I had to learn a lot. But the benefit of all that learning is you find out about Starfield's true potential. The things that weren't added in Starfield at final release, but they were there apparently in early development. I found this out by trying out different mods, and when I checked the descriptions, some of the modders had disclosed what they found during the modding process. Game files that show what we could have had. And I honestly feel like they really doubted themselves too much or doubted us as gamers too much. The two main things are a real fuel system and star stations. Now, to be honest, I'm not surprised they didn't implement these because they left out so many other major parts of the game they could have included, like more stuff to build with, which is already clearly in game because you can see the different assets around the map. And that leads me to the next topic, Starfield's map and environment. Starfield only has about a handful of major cities, but other than that, it's just randomly generated points of interest. Now, a lot of people complain about these because they do get repetitive, but I actually enjoy the gameplay. I just wish there was more of it. Starfield's game map is the star map, and it's made up of solar systems that you can explore. And then on each planet, there are other maps that you can explore because you can't walk around the entire planet. You end up running into an invisible wall. But the maps that Starfield does have to offer are huge. And since we're talking about the areas and environments you can explore, now let's talk about how you would get there. The ships and shipbuilding. I was so excited to see Starfield Shipbuilder until I actually got to using it. Right now, building a ship in Starfield is super confusing and time consuming, mainly because you can't preview the inside and the doors go wherever they want to. And so far, the only fix is to use a mod. I do love the fact that we can build our ships and decorate them and live in them, but there are quite a few limitations when shipbuilding, like how many ships you can build overall, how many pieces you can use overall, and also once you build your ship and then you go into the interior and decorate, if you try to go back out and make any more changes to your ship, you will have to redo the entire interior. And now let's talk about modding Starfield because shipbuilding heavily relies on mods if you really want to have a good experience. And also, a lot of other areas of the game really need mods to level up the immersion. The one thing that is the most important to know when modding Starfield is the load order isn't consistent. It will shuffle when it wants to. So you will need to keep a list of your load order. And even still, if you save your load order to Bethesda.net, it will still shuffle when loading it in the game sometimes. So just know if you're playing on console and not on PC, the heartbreak is inevitable. You will lose a game save because your load order shuffles and you won't be able to play it. This is really disappointing because Starfield has the potential to be a game that can be replayed like some well known and highly loved games like Fable, Saints Row, and GTA. Also, if you're modding Starfield, you need to make sure you only try one mod at a time or only that mod and its requirements at a time. Because if a mod happens to mess up your game save, you may be able to revert back a save and you'll already know which mod was the problem. And most importantly, play base game Starfield and then save your game. So that way you have a start point for when you are going to add mods and you don't have to go back through the tutorial over and over and over again, especially when you're experimenting with different mods. Now, I don't know how the modding experience is going to be on PS5, but for Xbox, it has been a wild journey. I've learned to make sure I read the descriptions, to stay up to date with the mods, but read the descriptions after updates so you know if you actually need to update the mod, and also to check out mod review videos because that will save you countless hours of downloading broken mods. I've also learned Xbox Series S can barely hold mods. Like, it can hold a few mods, but if you're trying to go over 30, anywhere near 100, it's not happening. And on Xbox Series X, you can hold nearly 400 mods. So give or take around 330 mods is good on Xbox Series X, and you can still have great performance, great visuals, and no lags. And from what I've heard from others, PC is the best way to go when modding Starfield. And finally, let's talk about Starfield's community and game support. Starfield gets a lot of hate because it had expectations set so high for it based off of the predecessors of this game. Bethesda set the bar so high for themselves with Skyrim and Fallout, and those fan bases are so dedicated and so passionate about the game that they seemed strict when it came to Starfield. That being said, Starfield does have a passionate community. We're just more on the quiet side because we're just enjoying the game. Now, as someone who just recently started playing Fallout, I understand why Fallout supporters and Skyrim supporters felt like Starfield should have had more. Because in all honesty, Starfield is missing a lot of elements from those games that could have elevated Starfield to possibly have been Game of the Year. Now, if you're someone that's looking to connect with the Starfield community or be able to learn more about Starfield modding, then I would recommend checking out Reddit. There's multiple community Starfield group pages up there, and you can request mods on a certain day of the week, and you might be lucky enough to get a custom mod made. And Starfield's support is surprisingly still active. I thought the devs had given up on the game because of the amount of backlash Starfield got, and I was just wishing that they didn't because with any type of server dependent game or game that has online features, it's a chance that things get shut down or removed, especially with that amount of backlash. And with that being the case, I really do hope that Starfield does get more updates for the base game, even if it is DLC. But I really just hope it's more base game updates because those will be forever lasting. We don't have to worry about those getting deleted if the Creation Club gets shut down because that is my worry with modding with Starfield. Like, it's so good that I worry that the mods won't be available one day. Like, and then I mean, I don't mind playing base game Starfield. I don't, but once you play it modded, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, once you play Starfield modded, you're not going to want to go back to the base game. Not unless they implement more. And when I say more, more of everything. More customization options, more freedom, more activities, more. They need to really study what mods on the Creation Center are being talked about and showcased the most, and they need to implement those changes into base game so that if they decide to shut down the Creation Center, I mean, uh, I really hope they don't. But if they ever had to, at least we would know that Starfield really feels complete, but it also has so much of what we all want that we will keep playing it and keep playing it and keep talking about it. And it can be a game for generations. But honestly, the devs would have to do more of what the modders are doing. They would have to implement more into the game. And if you're seeing this because you watched to the end of the video, thank you so much. And stay tuned because I have so much more on the way.